Okay. Sorry, I'm having a little camera difficulty there.
We are live whenever you're ready, Laura. Take it away.
I call the special meeting of the Wenatchee School District Board of Directors to order on March 29th. And our first item on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will follow along, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. So tonight's special meeting is to discuss and take action on the topic of returning students to full-time instruction. And we've received quite a lot of public and staff comment in our emails today. Too many, in fact, to respond to, but just know for those of you who are listening that we have seen them and we are aware of the various opinions on the topic out there. So thank you for sharing those. So moving along, Paul, do you want to open that up?
I will. Laura, thank you. Board members, thank you for being part of tonight's special board meeting. And I would agree with Laura. I appreciate everybody who sent emails over the last few weeks, if not over 2 months now, of advocating different perspectives. So really appreciate that and being involved in our school district. So I'll share a PowerPoint with you. Everybody see the smart restart? We good? Okay. Get over to it. So the same guiding principles continue to impact our decision making. From the start of the pandemic, it has always been to return our students safely to our classrooms because we strongly understand the benefit of in-person instruction. We've always committed to reevaluation as this pandemic has thrown new challenges at us from the get-go, and things have changed and it evolved over time. We've always committed to coming back and looking at things. And recently, within the last, 5-7 days, things have changed once again. And we make decisions that are in the best interest of our 7,600 students or our 1,200 employees, our thousands of parents and guardians and community members that we serve. So that continues to keep us focused. But I want to take a moment for a second, because throughout this whole process, there's become a divide within our community. And Desmond Tutu, I love this quote. My humanity is bound up with yours, for we can only be human together. I think this is a really important time in our school district. We've had a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. And as Laura indicated, and as I have and other board members, we value all those different opinions. But we're tied together as one Wenatchee School District and Wenatchee School District community. We recognize the seriousness of these decisions. And these decisions we try to make are the best student-based decisions we possibly can. But I think it is now time for our community to start coming back together. Our staff, our parents, our community members, recognizing we need each other. As Desmond Tutu said, my humanity is bound up with yours. We can only be human together. We can't leave each other out. We can't vilify each other. So I'm hopeful with tonight's work with the board that our community can start moving forward. I want to reiterate our number one resource is our people. We have 1,200 staff members. And I know some people have kind of gone after the 4.57 people or the 57 people who indicated they may take a leave. I want to be really clear. These staff members are our friends, our neighbors, our community members, and they all make decisions that are very personal to them as to why they would choose to do something. No decisions are ever taken lightly. And every individual who's requesting time with Kelly Lopez, our executive director of HR, all have their own personal stories as to why they're doing what they're doing. And we care for our staff. But again, this is a time for us to come together and support one another. So as I said last week, the sand shifted once again as the governor on March 25th announced that all school districts must follow the updated CDC DOH guidelines for K-12 schools. That includes the reduction of the 6-foot social distancing to 3 overall in a big picture view. This order went into effect that day. He literally said, this is impacted immediately or in place immediately. As you can see the quote from him there. Today, I'm ordering that we make this new standard available to all schools that want to adopt it. Guidelines go into further detail about when and where. And on the next slide, it really does impact decisions around elementary, middle, high school, how far apart students can eat, and the community transmission rate. All those pieces play a factor. It is not simply, and I want to be clear, it is not simply 3 feet for everybody all the time. That's not what his order is. That's not what the CDC recommendations are. That's not what the DOH recommendations are. That may be the headlines, but that is not the details of the K-12 guidance. Here are some highlights. Elementary schools, the Department of Health recommends all students remain at least 3 feet apart in classrooms where mask use is universal, regardless of the amount of community transmission from low, moderate, substantial, or high. Middle and high school, DOH recommends students should be 3 feet apart in classrooms where mask use is universal in communities where transmission is low, moderate, and substantial. So this is big. In 3 of the 4 categories, middle and high school can remain 3 feet apart. In areas of high community transmission, middle and high school students should be 6 feet apart if cohorting is not possible. In our school district, at the middle and high school, cohorting is not possible. That is not possible in our school district. I want to highlight something that I forgot on the last page. Adults, no matter elementary, middle, or high school, must be 6 feet apart from other adults and students. So this is really an important piece. Again, where I talked about grand overall 3 feet, that's kind of the overall takeaway, but the devil is in the details. And that's another one of those details that are key to our work going forward. So one of the big factors in this, especially for middle and high school, is the community transmission rate. Currently, the 14-day COVID rates for Chelan County is 206 per 100,000. Douglas County, 237 per 100,000. Chelan Douglas County, and why include Chelan Douglas County? That's been our consistent marker the entire time. We've consistently used the Chelan Douglas County numbers, and that's 217 per 100,000. So based off of that, based off of all 3, our current rate is in DOH's high range for over 200 per 100,000. So if you go back to those previous slides, that means that middle and high school must be at 6 feet because we cannot cohort. We must remain at that 6 feet for the students. So my recommendation, the district recommendation, is to return K-5 to full-time in person, 6-12 to remain in hybrid. That is the recommendation that I'm giving to the board tonight. Remember that 6-12 is not feasible due to the high community transmission rates. And I make this recommendation based off of what is best for the overall organization. It is not based off of one group or another advocating one way or the other. But I'll emphasize what Laura said. I have read every email that has come in. I have listened to many people on various sides of this. But overall, the board has the superintendent to make recommendations that are for the entire organization. And what the superintendent, he or she thinks is the best recommendation going forward. If the community rates were lower, I probably would have recommended K-12. That's not where we're at. So part of my recommendation is that K-5 return. The other part of my recommendation is because we're in that already I can't even remember, 206, we're above 200. That middle and high school remain in hybrid for the remainder of the year. Why is that? I don't think by coming back on a weekly basis to check a rate, to see where our community's at, and to keep holding this over families, our communities, and our staffs and our students' heads while we wait to watch the numbers go back and forth. One of our board members today asked me to reach out to Luke Davies, the new Chelan County health administrator. I did that this afternoon. My simple question to him was, Luke, with your crystal ball in doing this type of work for a number of years, do you anticipate these rates flatlining, declining, or increasing? He was crystal clear with me. He only sees it increasing over these next few weeks. There is a silver lining coming with more and more vaccines, as he will describe in his briefing tomorrow. But in the really good news that the New York Times reported out, as he indicated to me, is that the Moderna and the Pfizer have shown to reduce the transmission rate. He said, but the problem still is getting shots in the arms of people. They're still at their 6,000 to 7,000 shots a week. They haven't boosted up beyond that. So from Luke's crystal ball, things aren't changing in the near future. He did say he does believe he'll continue to ping pong from up and down, would we be in the orange range to high range? He believes that's what we would be doing. And I don't believe that is a good place for us to be, considering that the DOH is saying, if we're in high, it must be 6 feet, unless you can cohort, but we cannot cohort. So that's my recommendation to the board tonight, as we'll be seeking consensus from the board. Moving forward, though, I want to be clear. This recommendation does not mean the skies are blue, the birds are singing, and all is well. This is still a challenge. This is a challenge for still our elementaries and our middles and high schools, but specifically at the elementary level. There's still challenges with hiring. The board, staff, the community have probably seen all of our advertising for hiring. We're open, we're hiring. We're still not getting a great response. Lunches will continue to be a challenge. And I want to preface this, all these next pieces will be a challenge next year too. School the way we knew it in 2019 is not the school in which we're coming back to. That's not where we're going to be at now. It's probably not. I'm going to say probably because everything continues to change. It probably won't be in the fall either. So lunches will be a challenge. Many times, as long as the weather's decent. But as we saw last night, as I looked out the window and all of a sudden snow's falling after going for a walk in shorts, 5 hours later, we got snow coming down. Things change here rapidly. So we're hopeful because it's springtime that we're going to be able to eat outside more often than inside. At our elementaries and a number of our schools, we'll be eating in the gym. So our PE and physical education teachers will have to make some other arrangements there. Want to be clear, potential bus route, I'm calling it a blackout. Our staffing is still really low there. Just last week, we were down to one mechanic and our secretary in the office. Our director, our scheduler, mechanics were all driving routes last week. So if we're down even further, we may have to say, and I'm making up this route number, route 3, we can't pick up your students on this day. That's part of the hiring piece. And we've been working hard to hire and make sure things are happening. But I'll be clear, that's not a right now because we're going to go do this decision. Let's remember that was last week when we were still in all hybrid. We have a hiring issue we need to address. Want to be clear, in some of our schools where we have high student numbers, kind of in that 4th and 5th grade, where there may be 25 to sometimes 27, 28 students, if we cannot find that group of students a suitable classroom, larger classroom, we may have to make some changes around who's in that classroom for students. They may get a different teacher. I don't want anybody, again, to have a misunderstanding of what we're going back to. But again, this same thing would be true next fall too. And like we've done, we just continue to adjust to our daily routines. We're going to see over these next few weeks. So I'm recommending we come in April 19th. Why April 19th is because of the vaccines. When our staff were offered that vaccine dose on that Wednesday, we had the Pfizer. Pfizer is a 3-week window before you get your next vaccine. And then we added 2 weeks onto that for full immunity, which got us to the week prior to April 19th. So that's the logic behind that date and why we're choosing that date. We've heard from a lot of community members. We're here to help. Well, here's my request. If you're able, we have jobs. We're hiring. We need lunch paras. We need custodians. We need bus drivers. We're hiring. We're not looking for volunteers. We need people who are going to be there every day to do these things for us. And I'll be crystal clear. We're going to need these now, and we're going to need these in the fall. But we're hiring. We're hiring substitute teachers. We are open for almost every position this district hires for. So this is not easy. This is not easy on our elementary staff. It is another change. I understand that there will be frustration with me. I understand that. I fully accept that. But I do believe this is the best decision for our organization, both the K-5 and for keeping middle and high school in hybrid for the remainder of the year. Laura, turn it back to you.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is to give each board member the opportunity to respond with reactions before we move on to the decision-making mode. So if there are any volunteers who wish to go first.
I don't mind going first, Laura. The first thing I want to say, which wasn't on my agenda 15 minutes ago, is I've traveled pretty much the same journey as a superintendent. So I'm going to go lightly over things so I don't spend my time repeating too much. I do want to thank the vast majority of our community for the understanding and kindness in being willing to appreciate the way circumstances and impacts are not the same for different people. I've seen it over and over again. That's from parents, students, all school district employees, and the community at large. So I appreciate that level of concern. It's very important. The second thing that I've known for some time is this will not be normal school. And the phrase I'd use is the art of the possible. Teachers will not be teaching in the most effective way that they know. I talked about Huddle's last meeting. At 3 feet and 6 feet, you're not going to be able to do that. There are other things that are not going to work either for students or teachers the way they would most prefer. And many of you will be adapting for the third time this year. So just recognizing that and working together is really important. Very few of us are going to see everything we think should happen. And I too have had ideas that don't fit. So I think what really matters now is how we go about our interdependent tasks. I've raised what I call a third anxiety. We have anxiety about hybrid. We have anxiety about being full day in school. But I think a really important anxiety is one of uncertainty, causing a lot of anxiety and even division in the community. So now we need to pick a course this evening. We need to execute it together and do the best we can. There'll be opportunities to pitch in and offer improvements as we go along. There'll be a little bit of learning as we go. And we'll see that there are students or programs that need extra help that aren't perfectly taken care of. And we can look for resources for that. And there'll be things that go wrong. The game will go on. And then I particularly want to talk towards the school employees and their leaders. More is being asked of you. A lot's been asked of you. You are respected and valued. Employees make an organization. We're in this together. And part of the school district's responsibility is to take proper care of our employees. They are the bone, muscle, and brains of the organization to work for our common interest. And that's really how I wanted to look at it. I think I can work with a variety of recommendations. I think the one that we have just listened to seems to me very reasonable. And that's my version of the journey.
Thank you, Martin. Next, Julie.
Sure. First of all, I am very pleased to see that we've got our proposal to finally get a fair amount of students back in the school. I think it's clear that hybrid's not, was a Band-Aid. It was never meant to fix everything. And certainly with the mental health crisis that's emerged even in hybrid, I think it's important to get as many students back as we possibly can. Given how this thing changes, frequently, I do agree there is tremendous value, especially in part on parents and staff, to have a plan going forward. I think that, to Martin's credit, it does add anxiety to not know. And so I think it's important that we have a plan. Given the direction and the speed in which we've tried to make vaccines available to teachers and the message communicated that every day matters and that we know all students learn better in person, I do realize there's a set of students that it may not make as much sense, for example, seniors, to bring back with so little time left in the year. But I know we're hamstrung currently with our community infection rates. For a proposal and to add certainty would rather see us planning for high school and middles to go back as well, but making a decision that if the infection rates are still high come, even the week before the 19th, that it's a no-go. I personally struggle with the decision to lock that in, that we're just flat not bringing them back now, given there's, a little bit of time. I worry about the inequity across the organization. If some are told, okay, you're gearing up, and the others are told, stand down, that concerns me a little bit. I'd rather everyone walk out of here saying, yes, the board's goal is get everybody back in by the 19th, but yeah, we're going to watch those rates. And, if anyone's watching them, they're going to know that, hey, it hasn't crossed 200, so it's unlikely we're going back. I can't see how that would be lost planning in a lot of ways, because we're likely to be doing the same things, next fall. Unless, of course, there's a way to using this time, if we make that decision, to better supplement the hybrid model for those students who are, I don't want to call them left behind, but not getting that in-person chance, because I still think our hybrid model is not ideal for a lot of students. So that will continue to be a concern, but I'm very pleased to see the opportunity to get K-5 back. I still think it really should be our goal to get 6 through 12 back. I think I mentioned at last meeting that getting them in the classrooms may help our community infection rates by having them in there structured. They may not be out running around unstructured. And so I think there's a community component to that. But again, I appreciate you reaching out to the health district. I think it probably is overly optimistic that our rates would go down. But I'm personally a little uncomfortable saying right now you're left out. And I would rather say our plan is to go forward, but if it's not where it's at as of April, coming back from spring break or whatnot, then it's continue this model for the rest of the year. That would make me more comfortable. But I otherwise support, because I think this is a mental health crisis. I think we need to get students back. I appreciate the opportunity in some ways to sort of test run this program before the fall, because I don't think a lot is going to change. So I appreciate the teachers that are going to be asked to step up during this period. I'm hopeful that it's easier on them to do this, even though it's an additional change this year. I'm hopeful that this, working with students that they do know, will make this transition a little better for the fall, so that we are ready to hit the ground running next fall. Because I think, during this period, we know it's going to look different on the parent. Parents know it's going to look different, and I think there's grace in this. But we're going to be, if we're promised it's going to be working next fall, we're going to be expecting it next fall. So again, I would prefer that we plan for K through 12 until we know that we can't. But I do agree a decision needs to be made to relieve the anxiety. And I appreciate all the very respectful comments from everybody. We're absolutely listening to all sides of everybody. And I realize you've all worked very hard. It's been a very hard year for everybody. I'm, as a parent, not particularly excited about, switching things again. And I realize that, but that's kind of the way this pandemic works, is we've just got to be nimble and realize that we're all in some ways suffering together.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Next. Michelle? Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Laura. So I just want to echo Martin's thank yous. we know that there has been so much work behind the scenes this year. So thank you to our administrators, our teachers, our paras, our bus drivers, everyone, food staff. We've asked you to take on roles that you've not typically had in some instances, and you have always rose to the occasion. So I appreciate that. And I know our community does as well. I just want to also thank the vast amount of people that we have heard from in our community on both those favoring full-time in person and those favoring the hybrid model. We've had parents, students, teachers, maybe not administrators writing, MTSS coaches, and general community members. So I appreciate everybody's feedback. Everybody's voice is important. Some voices we've probably heard from less, and that is my concern. So I just want to review our most recent OSPI report card and some of our board values. So our current OSPI report card that is on the website lists our community, our district, as having a 22% English language learners, also 55% low income, and I believe we have 15 to 20% migrant student population. And then we also have 700 plus students who are homeless. These students have had barriers and obstacles in their time in our district, and we are working to make that better. And I think in a pandemic, sometimes those gaps have widened. And my hope was that just as we rolled out the beginning of the year addressing educational justice for our students who were furthest from it, I had hoped that we would have a similar approach. I do appreciate that we are taking into consideration our community viral rates and holding off on 6 through 12. I would like to echo Julie's comment that I believe this inequity across the district by saying we're going to make full-time in person for the elementary students, I think that could lead to some difficult feelings amongst our staff. So I guess my concerns are really surrounding our board value of equity. So if we look at our students who are struggling the most, I looked at all our comments that we received in the last 72 hours as well as previous ones. And, very few talked about the issue of equity, but this is a board value. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about that. We had at least several teachers in the last 48 hours reach out who work specifically with English language learners or migrant family students. Those teachers really advocated for staying in a hybrid model so they could make the most gains with their students who are really struggling, particularly those who don't have a foundation in English like many other students. We had also a community member who is Latinx who shared perspectives from the greater Latinx community. She has a number of connections. She shared a number of members in our community who we could reach out to. I reached out to some of those, and I wanted to share some of the comments that were shared from that list. So I made that phone call earlier today, and some of the families that were represented are only English or non-English speakers, so I could not speak to them, but I was able to speak to people who had heard them speak at a meeting that happened on March 18th. This was when we had our ongoing parent survey. So some of those folks had not received a call yet. And I know we made a number of calls from our district to families, but they had concerns because they didn't know how to speak or write English. There were also concerns that vaccines were not available for kids yet. As we know, the studies are still pending. And even a single parent who was wondering, about, her own students, who has a third grader, said, I'm not sure why we're not waiting until next year for the full time. So this is coming from a single parent. The parents that were concerned about vaccines not being available for kids yet is, what's the rush of going now? These are folks from the Latinx community. And I know that we've had some discussion about whether people are feeling safe that they can go get vaccinations, whether there's a presence of uniformed folks. And so I explored that a little bit more deeply with some of the members. And although the rollout has allowed for access for members of the Latinx community, for instance, multi-generational households, those spots were open up weeks ago, maybe a month ago. But many people were choosing to wait because they had a friend who had not had it yet. They didn't know anyone who had had it. They were also waiting because their younger family members didn't have that opportunity. And so whether this is a cultural piece of this is just what we do, or there's hesitancy based on I'm going to wait until somebody who I know, who I trust gets it, we are not seeing the vaccination rate within our own Latinx community the way we would hope it would be, the way we know that it's being offered, but just because it's being offered doesn't mean that people are taking it when they are available to get that. Families have dealt with family members who have been sick from COVID, sometimes for months. There have been multiple deaths in families due to COVID. Families are still grieving, is what I was told. So I don't think we can minimize the impact that COVID has had on our community. And as a physician, I really think that if we are to take our role in equity responsibly on our board, we have got to focus some light on these issues. We have got to focus on our students who are the furthest behind. If we have English language learners who are 2 years or more behind in reading, those students need intense services now. If we pull back from a hybrid model and go into a full-time in-person model, those students are not going to have the same availability for intervention. I know that 2 teachers that I spoke to in recent days, there are at least 2 separate buildings in our district that are doing some pullouts for students who are struggling the most academically, whether they're on IEPs or they're just incredibly behind. And I applaud them for those efforts, but we need to have a district-wide approach for those students who are at highest risk. We need to live by our standard for equity, because I think doing it in this manner is really, it's equal, but we all know that equality is not the same as equity. And the students who have always come up on the short end of the stick, there are bigger gaps now. And I think we owe it to them to be paying some extra attention to them during this pandemic to help them make the gains to catch up with other students who do not have the same struggles, who are not grieving family members' loss, who are not trying to make ends meet. I mean, I don't live in that community. I have privilege. I am white. My family has a reliable income. I cannot be in their shoes. I'm not in their shoes, and I don't pretend to be in their shoes. But I think we cannot ignore the families who do not have that voice, who are uncomfortable speaking up because they speak Spanish and they don't have any English skills or they're not very comfortable with them. We need to be partnering with a number of organizations who they feel comfortable with. And I'm going to read just a brief statement from this group that came out on March 18th that the person sent to us. 1, parents don't understand how their input is used in decision-making and therefore are hesitant to answer truthfully. Many parents wait to get a call from school so they have someone who can answer their questions and explain the plan in the way they can understand. 2, when given a space to ask questions and understand the plan, parents don't see the advantage of having students attend school full-time for 6 weeks, or in this case, a little bit longer maybe. They see that COVID cases are rising in our community, as Mr. Davies has continued to point out, and they are worried about safety measures being relaxed in schools to accommodate more students. Some of them are just now getting vaccinated and want to see more parents and students getting the vaccine. We know that students under 16 are still not eligible for vaccinations at this point because the studies have not been completed. And finally, 3, parents would like schools to collaborate with trusted messengers within the community who can help them understand how their input is used and also help schools and parents communicate better. Some of those trusted partners might be Cafe, Parque Padrinos, Hand in Hand Immigration, and there may be others. But I believe that this is the way forward, and I'm not expecting that we have to have a plan today, but I really want us to be careful. We need to be listening to our folks who are working with these students who have the biggest gaps. And it's not because they're not trying, it is their circumstance in life. They're born in a place where maybe English is not the primary language. They are in homes where they don't have maybe the supports that they need. So if we can provide those academic supports, we are a school, let's provide the academic supports to those students who need it the most. If we can move forward and do that for the rest of this semester, I think we'll have students, and as they move into summer school, they can continue to build on that. And in the fall, we can reach past these obstacles and meet them. I certainly hope that, that our board will consider the use of equity. I would also suggest that the same email that I read from, there was a study that was done in October. It is a Casper Community Assessment for Public Health Emergency Response. I would suggest that we all enlighten ourselves as to the differences that the Latinx community versus the non-Latinx community, the differences of how they were responding, how they were behaving, how they were concerned, how they were meeting their basic needs in October when this survey was done. There has not been a follow-up survey, but I do think we have to pay careful attention to these voices who don't feel like they have a voice. And I appreciate our teachers and our community members who have brought this to our attention, because I think the board has asked for that. And I know we are doing better at reaching out, but there's always room for improvement. So that is my hope, is that we could not open for everyone at the elementary level, but that we take a serious consideration for equity, and that we would pull back from this and then be able to move forward with a more equitable piece for those who are struggling the most academically. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Maria?
Thank you, Michelle. I agree with everything Michelle says, and it's my, that's kind of the foundation of what I've been advocating for my short year on the board. And, I think it's not specifically to the Latinx community, but we also have to look at our homeless population, our low socioeconomic population. And there's, if you break down the data, you'll probably see that there's students that already have, they're from our Latinx community. They're homeless qualify. There are low socioeconomic qualify. So there's just so many factors. And then there's the individual pockets that we need to consider when we're talking about our social justice. You know, which brings me to the point here that those students, we've heard from a lot of teachers, and those students that are thriving in this environment are probably our students that do not thrive in an environment with 25 other kids, because for whatever reason, if it's a language barrier or culture barrier, you know, it's working for a lot of our hybrid system is working for a lot of our students. And I can only assume that it's those students that are struggling the most, that it's working because of the individualized attention that they're getting through their small cohorts. You know, it breaks my heart to think of all the change that our children have gone through. If we're talking K-5, and I've been big on this because it's impacted a lot of the kids I know. You know, they've gone through a transition from remote to hybrid, change of teacher. Now we're going to talk about a change of teacher, possibly from hybrid to full-time instruction. Okay. You know, when you have so much change for such a short amount of time, it's hard. It's hard. I know our kids are resilient, but change is hard on anybody. It doesn't matter if you're 5 or if you're 14 or if you're 36. You know, it's just, you know, we're talking about making gains here. I just don't feel like such a drastic change for a short amount of time, for 6 weeks. I just don't see how it doesn't create regression for a lot of our students. Another thing is that, you know, I think in our previous board meeting, you know, there was a comment made about families needing to choose between staying home and working. The reality is that a lot of our families that have been working, that are in essential jobs, don't have the luxury to stay home. They don't have the luxury to say, well, you know what, I'm just going to take a leave for the year so I can stay home. These families have already made those adjustments, and they're making it happen, and they're making it work. A change this late in the year for 6 weeks would create another hardship on families. You know, then 6 weeks, now you're talking about summer break, and then you're talking about fall. You know, and again, those are families that are working essential jobs that don't have the luxury to say, you know, I'm just going to take this time off. I'm going to be home with my kids. Again, it's a hardship on our families. And I would say probably a good majority don't have the luxury to say, I'm going to stay home. They've already made it work. Going back to the shift in students with teachers, you know, if there's an exposure in a classroom, everybody's going to be going back to remote learning in that classroom for 14 days. Now let's talk about another shift in their resilient little personalities. Again, another shift for the family to have to adjust to for a short period of 6 weeks. That's where you know, my heart goes out to these families, to the students that would have to, it's just a cycle of change and uncertainty for 6 weeks, where we can probably say there's going to be some regression with all the shifting happening. Let's see, what else do I have on my notes that I haven't addressed? I guess, you know, with infection rates in our community, and you're talking to somebody that has had COVID in our immediate family, who had to be hospitalized, who is currently receiving medical intervention because of COVID. To see our rates go up at the rate that they're going, it almost feels like we're swimming against the current here. You know, we have a system that's working. We're just close to the finish line. And, you know, I think what we're doing is working. Our schools are open, our buildings are open, our teachers are teaching, our kids are learning. And then how do you bring about the equitable, the equality when it comes to a blackout with our transportation? How are you going to choose which route deserves to be out today versus next week? Is it going to be Mission View one week? Is it going to be Sunny Slope another day? How does that function, and how can that be equitable for all of our students? So, I think, I've said it before, hybrid was referred to as a Band-Aid. Well, you know what? The wound's still there. I think to take that is just going to put us in a huge setback to be able to start successful with everything in place for full day instruction in the fall. And to Michelle's point, I know we have summer school planned, and OSPI has said that summer school and fall instruction must be in person full day. Did I get that right, Paul? I believe I read that summer school and fall instruction will be in person.
I know fall. I'm not 100% sure on summer.
Okay, I thought I read summer school. So why don't we use that summer school space to have targeted instruction as the social justice, educational justice, rather than just be a big blanket summer school program, and not use it as targeted for our students that are 2-3 reading levels behind, grade levels behind. Not sure I brought any solutions to this conversation, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you. So,
Laura, could I just add one other comment just on the pandemic before you speak?
yes.
Thank you. So I do want to comment that many people have said take the risk, right? And although I understand that they want us to take that risk, taking a risk when you're in a pandemic, the cost is high. So as a physician, and that being a high cost scenario, we're gambling with people's lives, whether it's parents, grandparents, students, comorbidities that students can get because we have them in our community already. So keep in mind that we have spring break on the horizon. We have attestation forms that are not filled out reliably, and sometimes not very transparently if there are folks in their household who have COVID or being tested for COVID, that's not always coming back to our nurses. So I would just caution people that although we have many mitigating strategies, some of those strategies are not being followed to the T anymore. And I think that hurts us. So I would ask that community members continue to fill that out in an honest fashion for everyone's safety. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a difficult topic, and the change of the governor's direction to adopt the CDC guidelines was both good news and bad news. A few weeks ago, when our community transmission rates were low, I think I would have been a lot more elated about the whole thing. But what I like about the CDC guidelines is it does have a pretty well laid out plan regarding the red, yellow, whatever, green and blue. I don't remember what the colors are, but that there are specific things that happen regard to social distancing at each grade level, elementary, middle, and high school, so that we have guidance as a district as to when and how we can implement full-time instruction. Community transmission rates are very high. They're practically double what they were several weeks ago. That said, you know, we also have heard from a number of parties regarding the mental health crisis, I'm going to call it, that we have amongst our students. We have emergency room visits and referrals to outside mental health agencies in record numbers. And that's pretty heavy on my heart to know that students are suffering regardless of where they come from. Every student is a heart to be protected in my mind, and regardless of where they live in the valley, who their parents are, what their, living situation is. This plan isn't right for everyone. And I hope that we have alternatives in place so that for those families who feel that it is not appropriate to send their student back to school full time, that they can still participate in either the hybrid or the Wenatchee Internet Academy. It's my understanding that that is the case. Is that correct, Paul? Okay. So I feel like, that's the best sort of compromise that we can make at this time, to have alternatives for children whose families feel they are not ready, and to support those who feel like their students would do much better in full-time instruction. I've said this before, and I think that this whole experience is going to change the future of education forever, and probably in some good ways. We absolutely do need to address educational justice issues, and I think that's a long-term plan, not just a short-term plan. We need to get busy with that, and we need to focus on it, and we really need to have an objective, strategic plan to address students who are falling behind, because there's no good reason for it. We're all smart enough, we can figure this out. I mean, I'm not just talking about the people that are on this call right now, but I'm talking about our educators in the classrooms and our administrators, and we've got teams of people who can help us tackle this problem. I know that the plan is going to be disappointing to a number of people who have been pushing pretty hard for us to go back to full-time school, and even under the CDC guidelines. Obviously, elementary is the only level that will be going back with the 3 feet social distancing. So, like I said before, it's a good news, bad news type of thing. I do want to talk for a second about community transmission, because it's become aware. I just want to say that community transmission is the responsibility of every individual who has ears in this conversation and beyond. I am more than disappointed to hear that there have been large gatherings of teenage youth in our community sponsored by faith organizations where wearing of masks after you enter the door is not required. There are pictures and videos going around of these events in action, and I know that people were probably planning these events with the best of intentions, because their kids are suffering from lack of social interaction. I know you probably had the best intentions in mind, but I have to also ask, what role did those types of events play in the increased transmission rates that we're seeing right now? I don't personally have the answer to that, but it's very frustrating to hear about how much certain people in the community want our kiddos to go back to school, and then to know that maybe some of those same folks are sending their kids to events like this. I've heard about sporting events where the mask wearing and social distancing is not taken seriously, we as a board cannot make a decision that's going to benefit the most children in our area if we don't have the cooperation of every responsible adult out there. Please, please help us. Help us get our kids back in school. If you don't do it, if you don't play your part, if you don't tell kids the hard news, like, no, guys, it's not a good idea for you to go to that event, then I'm sorry, but you are playing a role in delaying the return of full-time in-person schooling. Please, I'm not making this political. It's not political. This is about kids. This is about kids who need to be in school. They need to be learning. This is the opportunity in life that they have to prepare themselves for their future. And they're missing out. Just, I can't even, please help, please help. I'm in favor of sending the kids to school per the CDC guidelines. I'm in favor of elementary kids going back, provided that there are alternatives. And I don't know what to say about middle and high school. I'm, you know, obviously right now it's not feasible. I mean, it doesn't follow the guidelines. You know, like Julie said, you know, maybe if right before the 19th, you know, the rates went down to, you know, 50 per 100,000, I guess we'd all declare a miracle and, I don't know, change our minds. But I think what it does to staff to be on this ping pong, you know, they need some certainty as well. And we can't provide that. We're in a pandemic. I mean, we don't know what the pandemic is going to do. We can't provide only a certain amount of certainty, a limited amount of certainty. So I don't think, you know, barring some miracle, I'm not really in favor of reconsidering the middle and high school return before the end of the year. But, you know, that said, like if our rates were down to 50 per 100,000 in a couple of weeks, I might be willing to reconsider that. But I just can't overemphasize enough the need for the community, every person in our community, to step up and do your part, please. We need this to move forward.
All right, Laura, I think we're going to need to do a vote on my recommendation, which is K-5 return, keep middle and high school in. Julie, I did not hear enough support for the other recommendation. But I would maybe start there. Laura?
Okay, so this will be a roll call vote, and in no particular order. Michelle?
No, for the equity reasons I stated earlier.
Julie?
I am a yay. I wish it was everybody, but yay at least for getting K through 5 in.
Martin? You are muted.
Yes to the recommendation.
Thank you. Maria?
No.
I am a yes. So that motion passes. We didn't really have a specific motion, but we were voting on the recommendation of the, the heavy load of this whole conversation kind of got me off my game on asking for a motion in a second, but I think we clearly understood that. The vote is 3-2 in favor of the superintendent's recommendation.
Okay, board, we have a public comment. Ron?
Sorry. So are we not going to put on the table the 612.
The 612 is part of the recommendation. The 612 stays in hybrid for the remainder of the year.
Okay.
So it's a 3-2 vote. K-5 return April 19th
Okay.
with middle and high school staying in hybrid for the remainder of the year.
Okay.
Okay, who do we have for public comment? How many do we have, please?
We have 2 live and we have 3 or 4 written. So I will, first public commenter live will be Karina Vega Villa.
Okay,
Good evening, members of the board. I have 2 children. One of them is in the Wenatchee School District and the other one will start next year. I have had a hard time with them attending school part-time due to COVID. I had to find a daycare provider who can help them with homework in the afternoons. I had to take Fridays off from work because my daycare can't take care of them. And it has affected my income. My kids have had a hard time not seeing their friends and teachers. My older son got depressed when his school closed and we're still on the wait list to see his therapist. He has enjoyed meeting his teachers and peers face-to-face in the last months. We are thankful for the work his teachers and school are doing to keep him learning and to keep him safe. But I'm not really here today to tell you about me or my kids. I am here to share the perspective from community members who aren't as fortunate as I am. I haven't lost any family members due to COVID. I have no concerns for my health or the health of my children due to COVID. I don't fear my family will be separated if I ask for help. I don't have any language barriers. I haven't lost my income considerably. I don't live paycheck to paycheck. I don't have multiple jobs to make ends meet. And I don't have to choose between healthcare or essential basic needs. In October, a CDC community study was conducted to better understand the COVID-19 outbreak in Wenatchee and East Wenatchee. The study included approximately 400 households. Half of the households were primarily in Latino neighborhoods and the other half were in primarily non-Latino neighborhoods. The study identified a significant income disparity between Latinos and non-Latinos. 60% of the homes in the Latino neighborhoods were households making $50,000 or less a year, compared to 30% of homes in non-Latino neighborhoods. The study also revealed that 38% of parents in mostly Latino neighborhoods didn't feel safe sending their kids to school, compared to 12% of parents in non-Latino neighborhoods. The summary to the CDC study was emailed to you earlier, and ideally a second survey would help us understand why, but unfortunately, we haven't had a second follow-up, a second survey following up. But Latino community leaders are currently working with the health district to better understand the impact of COVID-19 6 months after the original community study. In collaboration with community-based groups, I met with parents in a mostly Latino neighborhood and asked them about sending their kids back to school. Their concerns are summarized in the email. Director Sandberg made reference to them in her comments. Basically, parents don't understand how their input is used in decision-making and therefore are hesitant to answer truthfully. When given space to ask questions and understand the plan, parents don't see the advantage of having kids attend school full-time. And parents would like schools to collaborate with trusted messengers within the community who can help them understand how their input is used and also help students and parents communicate better. COVID has affected us all, but some parents and students have been hit harder. Please listen to their concerns. Please create plans that take into consideration voices that aren't often heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who is?
Okay, next up would be Rachel Petro, and then we have several, looks like 4 or 5 written after that.
Well, I signed up not knowing if I was going to testify. Good evening, guys. My name is Rachel. You know, I have 2 kids and I live here in the Wenatchee School District. I would really implore you as a board and as a district to really consider making plans to go back in the fall and making those clear. I think if we've learned nothing in the past year, it would be foolish, right? We've learned some things. Not all kids learn and not all teachers teach the best in one setting. So let's put some more options on the table. I think the Wenatchee Internet Academy, from all I've heard, has done well. But what other options can we have? Could we have more capacity at a Valley Academy? Could we have other unique educational settings like the new charter school that's going to start up? Where can we improve, right? I think we've got to have more options. Certainly, this is a devastating decision for our family, but please keep pushing forward. I would just like to say that, the school district is not unique as an employer. Every employer is facing challenges bringing folks back to work, and in great part because their kids aren't in school. Yes, I have the luxury of working from home, but guess what? Since my kids are home most of the time, I don't have the luxury of working more. I'm working more for less. So, if I can send an invoice to the school district for my parapro and teacher time, that would be great. But we're just in a kind of a catch-22 here. So if I think it was really important for the community to make definitive plans going forward. If this, then this. And I know that's a lot of work, but that's what everyone else is doing. And we need that to know that if this happens, then we're going to do this. So I would just encourage you to push forward and do that. My kid isn't 2 or 3 years behind, but she's definitely behind. And that's a real struggle. So I would encourage us to focus on those furthest away from justice, educational justice, but what about those that are caught in between? It's a real problem, and I know that you appreciate that. And I would just ask you to be open about trying new solutions, things we've never thought of before or haven't been trendy before, because going forward, it isn't going to look the same. We're going to be faced with these mitigation factors for a long time. And if we think this virus is unique, it is somewhat unique, but we're faced with viruses all the time. So we're going to have to figure this out going forward if this is the way we now deal with such things. So thanks for listening. And please, these next few meetings, we would really like to see a definitive plan to move forward. Again, we're all making those decisions. The disruption is real. Every day is a huge disruption. I make plans and my 8-year-old changes that, right? Because she needs my devoted attention to try to get her through her studies. So I don't know what else. I am disappointed, but I think there's lots of people who are disappointed, and I'm sure there's some people who are relieved, but please keep pushing forward for our kids. This is about all of our kids, and your community has voted in a levy. We have supported schools. We're still supporting the schools. I would have never sent my kids back in the fall had I even ventured a guess that I would still be having this conversation in March. But we have fantastic teachers, and I know they're working just as hard as I am. We're all working overtime, and it's just too much. We got to figure this out. We need a better plan going forward. So I just implore you to think outside the box. Put more options on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Kim has 4 or 5, I believe, to read.
Yes. Okay. First one is, get the timer going here, from Emma. Good evening. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to the concerns of those around you on the topic of returning students to school full time. I appreciate that you are trying to think of the next steps and what that looks like for our district. Maybe you've already made a decision, maybe not. But I do want to say that I watched the entirety of the board meeting you held last Tuesday. I was horrified by some of the comments people were making to you. These public comments are not meant to blame, shame, or hurt others to get what you want. I hope tonight is different. Returning students back to full-time in-person learning after spring break is too fast. Your staff, teachers, paras, janitors, specialists, etc., have commented in every meeting explaining to you why this is not the right choice at this time. Yes, this is our job and we love it, but in a pandemic, we are already going through enough and have been through enough changes, and we don't need more. We have a system that works, and though some are unhappy with it, your employees are finally feeling a little less anxiety because we have a routine and it's one we trust. If we don't take good care of our staff, then we can't expect them to take care of our kids. We are people too, with feelings, families, and trauma from the pandemic, just like everyone else. There are schools all around the state that are just now bringing students back into school in person. We've already done so much. Let us finish this year strong and strategic and look ahead to this fall as another opportunity to discuss returning students full-time in person. Please think about those who put in the time, effort, and safety into every day to make sure our students can come back to school. Keep hybrid learning through the end of this school year so we can continue a routine we know and trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, this is from Darcy Dorsey. I have no doubt of Dr. Gordon's and the board's understanding of the importance of full-time in-person learning. It is because of this understanding that a return to full-time in-person learning at this time makes no sense. The hybrid model is working for staff, students, and support staff. Student learning is robust right now. The challenges and outcomes of pushing to full-time in-person learning would not improve the learning that is going on right now. I fear the opposite would occur as a result of the schedule, staffing, and proximity challenges all schools would face. Thank you for taking the time to hear public comments.
Thank you, Darcy.
This is from Alyssa Bones. I urge the school board to bring at least elementary age kids back to school full-time as soon as possible. With vaccination rates and availability going up, 3 feet of distance approved by the CDC and the state, and all research pointing to children being low risk for severe or complicated COVID cases, it's time to bring the kids back so they can grow socially and reconnect with a love of learning that virtual tasks and specials do not build. Please consider a creative solution to quell staff and parent concerns. The weather is getting warm. Students can eat sack lunches outside with their class instead of crowding in lunchrooms. Some specials may be able to move outside as well. Outdoors, distance mask breaks give kids a break from masks during the school day. Districts across the country are making this work for their kids and staff, and I know we can too. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Alyssa.
This is from Brianna Shales. Dear Wenatchee School Board, I am a parent of a 3rd grader at Washington Elementary and writing today to express my support for returning schools full-time and in person at the end of April. I realize that is not an easy decision for the board to make, as you will not appease everyone either way you go. However, like Ms. Jake stated during the March 23rd meeting, it is your obligation to ensure kids are in school when it is allowed and safe to do so. I believe the data around in-school transmission mitigation efforts, recent CDC and Governor Inslee support over 3 feet of distance in schools, and widening vaccination access for adults all provide support to make this happen before the end of the 2020-21 school year. I want to remind the board of a few things that the school environment offers children: safety, education, personal development, socializing, yes, even with masks and distance, food, physical activity, access to arts, and much more. We are grateful for 2.5 hours of school each day because it is better than all virtual, but it is not enough for our son or any child. They are falling behind academically and struggling in other ways because they do not have the consistency that the school environment offers. I want to remind the board that parents were given options at the start of the school year to determine the best learning choice for their family during the pandemic, including parents like myself, who opted to return to school in person once it was deemed safe. We've learned since then that schools can safely operate with mitigation despite continued community transmission. The data and guidelines now align to open schools fully. It is feasible to open according to Wenatchee School District survey findings, and Washington State has adopted CDC 3-foot distance guidelines. I am encouraging you to vote in favor of returning schools to full-time in-person school. It can be done and it will be hard, but our kids need this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna.
Okay, I think this is the last one. Ron, is that your thought? Last one?
Yes.
Kelsey Williams. Okay. Kelsey Williams, if full-time max capacity is to happen, will this include finally letting special needs kids with mask exemptions back, or better yet, not forcing them if they physically, mentally cannot mask? Or will the discrimination against these kids continue and cause an even bigger regression that special ed paras will be forced to deal with? Many parents feel the same as I do. Many are ready to take their children out of school regarding these guidelines. Washington State Superintendent says do no harm, but these new guidelines you try to place will do the exact opposite. That is it.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Laura, the only thing I would say to one of the public comments is that Governor Inslee's orders are to return all students for full-time instruction next year with the 3 feet mandate. So that decision has been made. We are returning next fall. And what I alluded to earlier, that we're going to have many of the same challenges that I listed will be in the fall as well. But we are returning all K-12, pre-K-12 students next fall under 3 feet. That is crystal clear from the governor's perspective.
Okay, so to continue on that thought, we will be developing plans as some of the commenters suggested that we can give updates on how we're going to implement that between now and then. Correct? Okay, so I believe that brings us to the end of our meeting. This was very difficult, just very difficult. I don't think anybody takes this decision lightly, and we know it's not right for everybody. Not everybody's going to be happy. And I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. You know, we made the best decision based on the best information that we have at the moment. And we really are trying to serve all students in the best way possible. So thank you, everybody. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.